Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. I switched my business workspace manager to ClickUp in the fall of last year, and it was a big decision and a lot went into the switch, and it ultimately was such a good thing for my business. We're more organized now. Literally everything is in ClickUp. I was able to cancel tons of subscriptions that saved me now well over $150 a month between all of them, and I just love it. I love ClickUp. As a virtual team with multiple offers, it's been hugely helpful. And I worked with our podcast guest today for that ClickUp setup. So Courtney Lazar is the CEO and founder of SystemsUp, which is an agency of system solution champions and educators on a mission to elevate the way online business owners think about their back-end tech. Courtney has seen firsthand how creating systems make the day run smoother. And as a systems expert, she's worked with 6- and 7-figure online business owners to completely reinvent their systems. And today she's here to help you. And this is such a fun conversation. We're talking about things like shiny object syndromes with project managers. You know, there's Asana, there's ClickUp, there's Notion, there's all these different things. How do you decide what's right for you? We talk about the different areas of your business that you should automate and how to evaluate your systems, how ClickUp is different from tools like Dubsado and HoneyBook and how to keep it all straight. We both talk about our favorite ClickUp tools, how to make SOPs for your business. That stands for standard operating procedures. And she has a really good system for that. How to think about your end goal when it comes to systems and so much more. And yes, we do talk about ClickUp plenty in this episode, but I do want to say this isn't just a ClickUp episode. So if you're not using ClickUp or not interested in it, there's still a lot here for you as well. Courtney and I have known each other online for years, and she's a sweet friend, like a real mom and business owner pal of mine. And I've been on her podcast a few times, Back End Brain, if you want to check that out. And she was one of my very first template customers ever years and years ago. So that's how we originally met. And that's super cool. That's back when she was even under a different business name. And it's cool to see how her business has evolved so much over the years. And anyway, I just adore her, and I know you guys are going to as well. So here's my conversation with Courtney. All right, guys, I'm chatting with the wonderful Courtney Lazar from SystemsUp. And when we both got on this, we were like, we have to resist just talking for an hour without recording, because we did that last time.
Yeah, at a minimum. It's I always feel like we have to have a catch up time, and we're really bad about just talking forever. I think it's literally almost the entire duration of our last podcast interview, or catch up.
Yeah, and then we're like, oh wait, we need to record this actually.
We're actually here for a reason.
Yeah, so we love talking, and I actually love talking to Courtney so much that instead of asking her to do one episode, I was like, let's actually do two on completely different topics and divide them up. So you guys are hearing the first of our two topics right now, talking about ClickUp. Yes. But Courtney, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you help in your business.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So like Elizabeth said, I'm Courtney Lazar. I'm based in the Florida Panhandle. So if you guys are familiar with Destin, Panama City Beach, I'm smack in between the two in Santa Rosa Beach. So we are down in Florida, originally from Missouri, but I got started in my business almost 6 years ago, which is crazy. I just celebrated our 5 years and we're already almost approaching 6. I got started because I was actually living in Hawaii and I was working for a tech startup. And I ended up moving back to Missouri, and because I had been working with their APAC industry, which is their Asian time zones, and moved from Hawaii to Missouri, I could no longer, really work in those time zones anymore without being, up in the middle of the night. So I got stuck at a corporate job that I just, going from a remote tech startup to working at an insurance company in the same breath was a night and day difference. And I was really just unhappy with my job. And so I ended up trying to find ways to start working remotely online. I started taking some courses, and at first I actually, which Elizabeth, you'll probably laugh at this, but I first started with web design because I thought that was the only way that I could make a decent living.
I remember that. I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was the only way I could make a decent living working remotely. And then I started doing it and realized I hated it. Like, I am not a creative. Like, I could look at a design and duplicate something similar, but if you told me to get creative and be like, oh, I like this type of aesthetic, it just does not work. So I quickly realized that that was not something I was good at. And so one thing that I ended up doing was making a list of the things that I love doing and the things that I'm good at. And my husband always makes fun of me because he compares me to Monica Geller on Friends.
Love Monica.
Just a little PSA. I am not as, what's the word?
Type A.
Yeah, I'm not that bad. She's pretty bad, but I love organizing. I love, color coding everything. Like in school, if I was writing on a piece of paper and I got a doggy ear, I had to start over because it wasn't perfect. I was down that realm of the world. So I started hearing this term called OBM. Like, what's an OBM? Online Business Manager. And it's basically somebody that comes in and helps people run their online businesses. And, they have to be very organized and very detail oriented. And so I started doing that in December of 2017. And as a part of being an OBM, one of the very first steps that I would always take is to kind of review my clients' systems and platforms and make things more organized for them. And once I started doing that, I started to really love that piece of organization and just what I was doing for my job. And so at that point, I think it was probably 2 years or so after I had been doing OBM work, that I decided to make the total pivot. That's two Friends references in the past 2 minutes.
Yes.
I made the pivot to just focusing on systems because that's what I loved. And, I think that's the beauty about like running your own business is you get to decide what it is you do instead of becoming complacent and saying, well, I'm already doing this, I'm just going to continue. I decided to change. And so I've been doing systems setups for 3.5 years now. And we specialize in ClickUp, but that's really how I got started. And the big reason I wanted to be able to, be my own boss and be location independent and travel the world. And I did that whole thing for a while. And, I traveled remotely around Europe and we did Asia and some really fun spots. And now I'm in Florida. So, and have a little kiddo. I have my son, Luca, who is going to be 2 in September. And I have another little boy on the way and due in December. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist and how I got started and a little bit about me. So
I love hearing your story, and it really is so perfect. Like, you are like such a organized and like systems person. So even hearing, like you said, you didn't like it if the dog ear was wrong as like as like a kid, it's like, yeah, that like makes such a good fit. And Courtney and I, our babies, little toddlers, I guess, are literally 3 weeks apart, which is why we always have like one of the reasons we have so much to talk about, because they are very similar little toddler boys. And we've had a lot of the same mom things happen to us. So, yeah.
It's right in the same timeline. Like if one's doing one thing, one is, closely following behind. So I message her on Instagram and be like, hey, what are you doing with Colin for this? And how are you doing this? Cause I'm clueless and first time mom world over here. So.
Yes. So fun. Okay. So let's start. Okay. ClickUp is your thing you specialize in, which is what we're going to be talking about this episode. And people who listen to this podcast regularly or recently know I'm obsessed with ClickUp.
Yes.
And I haven't been using it forever. I started using ClickUp in, I guess that was September of last year, when your team overhauled my entire systems of my business, one of the best investments I've made as a business owner. And that was, you guys were incredible to work with. Just super fun. And I just, since then, I have even felt empowered to do even more in ClickUp on my own. And we're running my whole business in ClickUp. So I have a lot of passions around it as well. But to kind of start, I asked you this before we were recording, but I want everyone else to hear it as well. What is ClickUp? Is it a project manager? Is it something else? And what are other comparable products, just so people know if they haven't heard of it, or if they're like, wait, I use this thing, how's it different, and all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a good question because I feel like ClickUp's evolved a lot over the past couple of years. So I'd say primarily, yes, it started as project management. And if you go to their website, it's still going to say a project management software. So in comparison, if you're not familiar with ClickUp, it would be similar to things like Asana, Trello, Monday.co or .com, Basecamp, Some people are starting to use Notion for project management now, but it is in the similar realm as those softwares. However, one thing I would say is that because ClickUp has evolved so much over the past couple of years, and they've released so many different types of features and ways to customize and manipulate the software, that we really coin it as more like workspace management versus just project management, because you don't just have the only ability to just manage projects. You can create databases, you can create directories or tables or even spreadsheets. You can create living documents. So just like a Google Doc, you can have the exact same thing inside of ClickUp that's searchable, that is live, that multiple people can edit, that you can share publicly outside of your workspace inside of ClickUp. So there's lots of different ways to utilize it. So while yes, it's project management, I say it's honestly a lot more than that. So hopefully that kind of clears that up a little bit.
Yeah, you're right about the document feature. That was something I didn't know before using ClickUp, but like right now, the questions for this interview are on ClickUp for me. And so like I have you on one side, my ClickUp pulled up on the other side. And we still use Google Drive for a lot of stuff related to the podcast and other things like storing all the images for a template and things like that. But I love putting documents in ClickUp because that's like right where everything else is living. And if it's not something like a super long blog post, for example, we're still putting in Drive, but I like doing things like podcast notes and stuff all in ClickUp.
Yeah. And what's great about it too is if you use docs inside of ClickUp is you're able to directly create tasks from within the document inside of ClickUp. So if you, for those listening, if you just were to highlight a word or like a sentence inside of ClickUp, you can have the option to create a task. So it's actually just makes it a lot easier, especially like, we use ClickUp docs for meeting agendas. And so at the end of every meeting, we obviously have like deliverables or action items that come out of that meeting. And so it's a lot easier for us to be able to task out any deliverables from that too, because it's right there in ClickUp, it's already integrated and it's ready to go. So
yeah, there's so much it can do. With talking about like your work on ClickUp, a workspace management software or project manager, do you think every business owner needs to use one of these kinds of tools? Or do you think there's some people where you're like, hey, you're brand new, you don't have any clients yet, you could wait on this, or you don't need it at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it kind of depends. Obviously, I growing up was a big planner, like paper planner person, and I loved writing my to-do list down. And like, even as of this, I still do that. Like I have ClickUp, but sometimes it's still just easier for me to like write down some to-dos for the day, just so I have things to check off and I'm not losing track of everything. And we have clients that'll come to us and they've been managing their businesses inside of a Google Excel spreadsheet, and it's working for them. I think the caveat is what is your goal with your business? Because if it's just you and you're just managing a couple of clients, like, is it totally necessary? Probably not. Will it make your life easier? Probably. So, and the thing with it too is that you always want to think about is the quality of work you're producing for your clients. And why I say that is because if we are working out of a bunch of different documents or spreadsheets or different tabs of, I've got a notebook here, I've got a Google Doc up here, things get scattered and lost, and it can attribute to a lower quality of work because you are losing track of small details and things that would just be a lot easier for you to quickly find if you had them organized inside of a project management tool. And so when I go back to say it depends on your goals, one of the things that you want to ask yourself is one of your goals growth? Is one of your goals to be able to scale your business, hire a team member, bring on more clients? And if the answer is yes, then I would say it would behoove you to get into a project management software, because that is what's going to be able to make it easier for you to delegate to team members, to be able to keep track of things more easily. And what typically we see end up happening is we'll have clients come to us that either didn't really plan to grow or they had the plan to grow and it just happened a lot more quickly than they thought it was going to. And then they get stuck in this like hamster wheel of taking care of their clients, and they can't go back and like reinvent the wheel, so to speak, or like take the time to focus on their systems or their project management because they're so busy doing client work that their business has gotten put on the back burner. So if you're listening to this, you're brand new in your business, then I definitely recommend at least getting a footing and attempting just to get a start so that you don't get to this spot where you're super slammed and busy and you can't take steps backwards to get yourself set up.
Yeah, I love that. I think like having more like cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, is also a time that you can feel like you need it, because having, especially for most of us who are working with team members, whether that's contractors or like a W-2 employee, it's remote for a lot of people listening, which means that you're going to be relying on remote communication, and having a project manager is really helpful for that. Okay. With ClickUp specifically, like you are such a systems expert, and I know you've explored other tools as well, because we've talked about that, but like what made you go all in on ClickUp? And do you think ClickUp is right for every business?
Sure. So I would say before we were in ClickUp, I would say vastly in Asana. That was like the big project management tool at that time. And one of the reasons that we had tried things like Monday.com and Basecamp I had with one of my clients, and some clients use Trello. And one of the big reasons we switched to ClickUp was its ability to be customized. And that was just because, yes, there's a lot of, a lot of people have remote businesses, but there's so many different types of remote businesses and different needs for different clients. And what we were seeing is, especially like when we were in Asana, at least at the time, and that's not to say that Asana hasn't evolved with their features as well between now and then, but at the time, it was like you were trying to fit your business into a box in terms of how it was organized and how you managed everything. Whereas in ClickUp, it feels like you can use ClickUp to cater to your business's needs versus vice versa. So Asana box, where you had to fit your business, and then ClickUp gives you the freedom to mold your business however you need to, and ClickUp molds in around it, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see that too, because I've used like so many of them as well, but I used Basecamp when I switched over to ClickUp with you guys. And it was like, I was fitting, especially when we talk about growing with a team and things like that, I was fitting things into Basecamp that didn't really fit that well. And I still really love Basecamp, and I think it's great for specifically client projects. That was like huge, of like putting clients into it and running projects in there, which you can also do in ClickUp really well. So, but yeah, that was like a thing for me of like, oh yeah, I can't do this thing I need to do. And I'm like duplicating stuff weird, and it just didn't always, work out like I was hoping it would. Within ClickUp, what would you say are some of your favorite features that would apply to listeners maybe as like something cool they can do? I can also share mine.
Yeah, so
I have some same as you.
It's like asking my favorite food, which is impossible to answer. So I think probably one of my favorite features is custom fields. And the reason being, and that's a very I'd say basic feature, something that's pretty simple to use, but I think it makes some of the most impact in terms of how you're structuring your setup, and it gives you the most flexibility and freedom to be able to build what you want. So that's why I personally really love custom fields. And I would say outside of that, I really do love automations. We use those a lot, like the ClickUp native automation. So obviously, if you're listening, you have things like Zapier, however you choose to pronounce it, Make, or there's lots of other options in terms of automation software, but ClickUp actually has native automations built in, and that's probably one of my other favorite features too.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. automation. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Do you want to discover the driving forces behind every purchase or new client you get? Do you want to transform your marketing game with a fun exercise in crafting irresistible copy? I just created a brand new freebie download that people are already loving, and it is a marketing exercise in a 16-page printable workbook. This is the exercise I've done for years in my business to help me in creatively marketing my services and products in a way that actually touches on the reasons people make buying decisions. You can get this guide for free at elizabethmccravey.com/reasons, short for reasons people buy, and I'll also link to that in the show notes. Don't miss this. It's so helpful and a really fun exercise too.
Let's talk about automations for a second, because that is like something that's very on key with people who are into doing lots of systems. Like we talk about automating a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just like a popular term, right? I've told like designers, for example, book that designer, like you need to have an automated email go out after someone fills out your contact form versus you feel like you have to respond to them immediately. Like there's so many ways this is helpful to us as business owners. But do you think it's possible to over automate a business? And then what advice would you have for business owners who are like, I don't want to over automate, but I want to do more automation? What do you think about all that?
Yeah. So 150% you can over automate. That's one big thing that we actually talk to our clients about too. One of our big things is that we want to provide and help build as lean of a system as possible for your business. And the reason being is the more tech, the more software, the more gadgets, bells and whistles you're using, the harder it is to manage, which then makes it harder to onboard team and get team used to different things and know where everything is at. And so having a more lean system is just better for everyone from an efficiency perspective, but you also are working with technology, right? And tech breaks. That happens. That's just the nature of this world, right? Like not everything's going to work and function how it's supposed to all the time. And so if you're trying to really automate a lot, then you're also going to run into a lot of potential issues with glitches or automations not firing when they're supposed to be. And then you have to go back and look through this huge laundry list of like, what automation was it? Where did it break? Why did it happen? And try to troubleshoot and figure that out. And so I think there is definitely a fine line between over automating and automating, just enough. And the other thing that you also want to make sure that you're still doing is putting enough human touch on your client experience, because yes, automation is important and it is something that definitely speeds up your efficiency and your even, can contribute to, higher ROI in your business, depending on how much time you're spending on things. But it's also, there's something to be said for the human touch that you're putting on your, communication with your clients or your projects. And so that's something to pay attention to, is just, making sure that you're not over automating from the perspective that it feels like a client is interacting with a robot and not a person that they want to be working with. What was the second half to that question again?
Yeah. What advice do you have for business owners who want to add more automation into their business?
Yeah. So I would say start simply. So one thing that we talk about with systems in general, and I think also applies to automation, is start with survival, not success. And what we mean by that is, what are the baseline things that you need to function in your business to get you by day to day? Like if there was nothing else running in your business, what are the things that have to be happening to get you moving forward? So again, that applies. It's kind of like our motto with all systems on like how to get started, which I know we'll talk about a little bit here in a minute, but I'd say that also applies to automation, is just to focus really on like the bare minimum of what you need to be doing and start there.
Yeah. I feel like that's how when I think about my systems before working with you guys, and then like now, it kind of even reflects that of like, I had a lot of good automations, but it wasn't like, I have a lot more bells and whistles automations now, basically. Where it's like, oh yeah, I could probably like, the business would be fine without that, but like this makes things easier on me, on team members, on customers, and like it goes really well. Okay. So for business owners listening who have systems right now, and maybe they're using ClickUp or something else, but they know they could do better with the systems. And I literally see this like in my podcast Facebook group. People were talking about this the other day. Like, would you suggest a complete overhaul of their systems? Like what I did basically, where it was like, okay, I'm on Basecamp, I'm completely overhauling. Or do you recommend like more so like maybe one step at a time, doing like a little bit here and there until they have it already?
Yeah, I think it depends on how much time you have to dedicate to it, number one. Like obviously, if you've got a lot of things that you feel like needs a facelift, an overhaul is probably something that would, benefit you. However, we're all business owners and we also have personal lives with things going on. We're moms, or we have maybe another job or other things going on in our life. And we have to be realistic about the time that we have to invest. And so I would say, taking it one step at a time would be, I'd say, more realistic for a lot of people. And this also kind of circles back to that, start with survival, not success kind of framework, because that's going to help you to determine what you need to be focusing on. And the thing with systems, and very similar to like SOPs, and for those who are listening, maybe not familiar with that term, it's a standard operating procedure. So a guide to follow in order to finish a project or a task. Is they're ever evolving, right? It is not just one and done. Like you don't build a system and then it's done and you never touch it again. It's something that needs to be maintained. It's something that needs to be managed and reviewed. And so with systems, you're never just going to be done building your systems. You're going to constantly be evaluating them. Is this system still working for us? Does this still benefit our business? So in terms of focuses, there's 3 places I recommend people starting if like kind of refreshing or re-reviewing their systems is something that they do want to be doing. The very first thing is what makes our money? Client fulfillment. Okay. So that's what you want to focus on first, because the client experience you provide is going to directly correlate to your bottom line. Because if you do a good job executing for a client, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be a good referral for your business. And that's free marketing, right? That's organic marketing. That's them spreading the name of your business just because you've done a great job. But you also just want to do your due diligence to your client. And so I always recommend starting with client fulfillment. The second area that you can focus on is your day-to-day operation. So what do you do every day, every week, every month to keep your business going? So those could be things like as granular as I check my emails every day, or I check Slack, or I draft a blog post every Wednesday, and focus on those systems next. And then the third thing that you want to focus on are what are called targets, or things that happen in your business for scaling and growth. So maybe it's things like launches, sales goals, growth projects, things that you're planning on doing for maybe you want to roll out a new marketing plan, and then start there. So client fulfillment, day-to-day ops, and then the targets in your business. Those are good 3 like categories, so to speak, to kind of help make this huge giant project seem a little bit more tangible and easier to digest. So you kind of have more benchmarks along the way to check off like, okay, client fulfillment, I've done everything in there. So
I love those specifics. And that is helpful because when we talk about systems, it is like, okay, there's like 1,000 things I could do. Yeah. What makes sense to start? And you're right, client fulfillment is where the money in the business is made, and therefore like really, really important with that. I love those 3 things. And talking about SOPs, because you mentioned that a minute ago, and you guys do a really great job with that. I'd love to know for people, and I have thoughts on SOPs too that I could share, but like for someone listening who's like, I don't have any SOPs. Maybe they're a solopreneur still and they're like thinking about hiring their first VA as a contractor for like a few hours a week, but they don't have any SOPs for the stuff that VA will be doing. How would you recommend going about like getting started with that?
Yeah. So I would actually recommend following the same like roadmap in terms of categories to focus on. And the reason being is if your goal is to hire, right? If your goal is to hire a VA, typically, the tasks that you want a VA to be working on are something that's going to help move the needle forward in your business. And a lot of times that's support with client work or something that's going to generate some type of ROI in your business. And so that's, I'd say, like why we want to follow that map, because we want to start with client fulfillment, because that can be one of the first things that you can delegate. Because if you're able to delegate more client work, that frees up more time for you to take on more clients and then in turn generate more revenue in your business. And so client fulfillment is still where I'd start. And then again, day-to-day operations. If your goal is to hire, and you could kind of visualize it in like a chart or 2 categories, so to speak. I would almost say, okay, you've got a chart of customer fulfillment. In customer fulfillment specifically, I have tasks I know I want to delegate. I have tasks I know I want to keep on my plate or find a way to automate in some way. And then focus on the ones that you plan to delegate first. So those are done so that when you are ready to hire, because sometimes that does happen quickly. Sometimes growth happens quickly and you're like, crap, I just don't have enough time. Like I need to hire somebody. Then at least those are done. And then you have a training or some type of resource to already provide that new hire when they onboard. And so I follow the same path, client fulfillment, day-to-day ops targets, but in those categories, focus on what you plan to delegate first, and then make the SOPs that fall in after that. Because the other thing to think about is you still want to have SOPs for the tasks you are completing in your business, because two things may happen. One, you may decide you don't want to do that task anymore and you want to eventually delegate it, or you may have to step away for some reason, and those things still need to be completed in your business. And there needs to be some type of documentation on how to complete it so somebody can step in and support you if for any reason you do need to step away for a little bit.
Yeah. With SOPs, what's your favorite way to make them? Are you like with something like Loom or written, or do we need both and other tools like that?
That's the $1 million question. We personally do both. And the reason being is we want to pay attention to people's learning styles. So as an example, a lot of people are visual, and especially I think in a remote space, it's better to have a visual aid when you're doing something to kind of guide you along in the process. So typically our default for an SOP would be like a Loom video. And then from there, we would transcribe it into a written SOP, which we have a template that we already have that we fill in with our process. Like for an example, we have somebody on our team that loves Loom videos, but then we have somebody else who it's not really their thing, and they'd rather like read through a checklist of to-dos and where to navigate. But there is a really cool tool called Scribe. If you haven't heard of it, it's SCRIBE. So if you want to do both, what it does is as you're recording a video or like a Loom video, it's actually going through and taking like snapshots of where you're going throughout the process, and it highlights like where you're clicking, and it drafts like little bullet points of like, this is the next step in the process. And so it almost like automatically creates a written version of an SOP from your video version that you're able to go back and edit, but it also includes visual aids. So it's a really great tool if you guys are interested in having a written version. I would definitely recommend checking that out. So
yeah, that's a great resource. And it's cool too. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in Loom now, they do have a transcription automatically, at least on my plan. And then they also do an AI generated description that's actually really good. I'm like, oh yeah, this is like, and an AI generated title too. Before, like once you hit record and you're done, it's like, oh yeah, here's your title. I'm like, oh yeah, that actually is like what I was going to title.
Yeah, it's actually been really helpful. I love the AI generated summary and titles, but the transcription for me has been really helpful just because obviously I have a toddler, and sometimes if a team member sends over a video, I can't have sound on for whatever reason, if he's sleeping or where something's going on. So sometimes it's easier or quicker for me to be able to go in and skim through the transcript versus watch the Loom video to at least get them a response. And then I can always go back and watch it later if I need to. But I do love that feature about Loom.
Yeah, that's a good point about not being able to always listen. Yeah. Okay, another question for you. This is such a real thing. How do we avoid shiny object syndrome when it comes to tools in our businesses and things like project managers? Because I think it's very possible, and this really happens with everything. Tools in general is the greatest way to say it. It's like maybe you build your website and show it, and you meet someone who likes Squarespace better, and you're like, oh my gosh, I did everything wrong. Why did I pick that one? Or, it might be that you are like, I'm set up on ClickUp, and now everyone's talking about Notion. That's like the one that I feel like we're hearing a lot more about right now.
Yeah.
What would be your advice though on just like avoiding shiny object syndrome and seeing that for what it is versus like knowing when it's time to actually switch tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's something everybody struggles with, even myself personally. And I think for me, it's mostly just because I love tech and systems and software in general. So if something new comes out, I want to go explore it, right? And that's fine to do. That's totally fine to do if you want to go explore it. I would avoid making a big overhaul and like committing to a platform without doing your research. And there's a couple of things to take into consideration when you're doing that. The first thing is obviously you want to do feature comparisons. Is you want to make sure that what you're able to do with one software, you're still going to be able to do with the other, because that's obviously like, that's why you're using the platform and that's like the end goal. obviously the other thing that you want to focus on is like doing a cost analysis. Like, is that something that is financially a smarter decision for me right now? You also want to think about the perspective of your end goal. And if it's scaling your business, what tool is better for growth and scaling? And I'll give an example of this. We used to have Kajabi. That's where we housed all of our course material. And we used ConvertKit for our email marketing. And we used some of the email marketing tools in Kajabi because that's obviously an option. This was obviously too a couple years ago before new features got released and things like that. But what we were noticing is we were needing to make more advanced funnels and automations inside of Kajabi for email delivery for students and things of that nature. And for us, we realized that, yes, it's convenient to have both email marketing and the course inside of one platform. However, with the types of automations we were wanting to build at the time, which Kajabi hadn't totally supported at the time, we moved to ActiveCampaign for email marketing because it was going to be easier for us to continue to scale and grow. Like, we weren't going to have to have a whole bunch of really cool funnels or whatever built out in Kajabi if that had been the feature at the time, and then move them all over to a different platform. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And kind of like what I talked about with Asana and ClickUp is, if your plan is growth, build in the system that you plan to grow into so that you're not having to move platforms in the middle of a big growth period of your business. So that's another thing to pay attention to. And then the last thing is, I think because of social media and because we're all so connected all the time and seeing what everybody does in their business, that we forget to focus on our own business. We're so I use the analogy of when you're running a race, right? If you're running the race and you keep looking at the person next to you, you're not going to win your race. You're not focused on your own lane. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing is focusing on your own lane and making decisions that's best for your business. You see Sally Sue over here. Well, she started a podcast and she uses Circle instead of a Facebook group. And that's fine for Sally Sue, but you have no idea what is going on behind the scenes of her business, what her personal life looks like, what her finances look like. You need to evaluate platforms and decisions in your business that's best for your business and stop paying attention to what everybody else is doing, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Today we're talking about better business systems, but what about better financial systems for your business? I created a freebie just for you where I walk through my end of the month financial routine as a business owner, like exactly what I do. I'm sharing the 8 steps I do every month to evaluate my revenue and expenses, do profit first in my business, pay myself, evaluate sales for the month, and so much more. And some of those steps I talk about in this free guide are actually done in ClickUp. So you can get the free guide at elizabethmccravey.com/profit. Read the guide, implement it, and figure out how you can take exactly what I'm doing and make it work for your unique business. So that's elizabethmccravey.com/profit. Now, back to my conversation with Courtney.
I love that. How do you, Courtney, specifically keep your blinders on in that race example? What are some things that help you if you have any to share of not paying attention to just what everyone else is doing? Whether it's within systems or your example of oh, they switched to Circle from a Facebook group, or they are doing text message marketing, whatever it could be. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
That's a hard question. It's a hard question just because I do struggle with it sometimes. I feel like I get FOMO. I'll experience from they switched to this new cool platform, and I'll go kind of poke around and see what it's all about. But in the end, I kind of circle back to, what I kind of explained in terms of how we're evaluating everything. We're big data people, we're systems and we like analytical data. We like looking at the bottom dollar, right? What's making us money? What makes the most sense, And so I think that's always what we're paying attention to is just is this a smart business decision for us, or we just want to do it because everybody else is doing it? And in the end, it comes down sometimes to making the boring decision, but it's sometimes the better long-term decision. And that's not always the fun thing to do, but it's just sometimes what you have to do, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I love that advice though. Making, the boring decision can sometimes be the right decision.
Yeah.
Okay, last question before we move into rapid fire questions. And if this episode feels short, guys, you're going to hear Courtney again soon on the podcast to actually talk about how she works one day a week as a mom. So we're dividing them into 2 episodes. But I wanted to ask you, what features on ClickUp do you feel like small business owners don't know about, listeners of this podcast, or maybe they're not using enough, or just something where you're like, oh yeah, like that's a really good one that they should try to do in ClickUp?
Yeah. So I think it would be two things. I think one would be automations, just because a lot of people, the button's kind of hidden in ClickUp where you create an automation. So it's not like I'd say readily visible when you're inside of ClickUp and exploring, but I think it can make a really good impact on your like day-to-day manual tasks that you're doing. So I would say automations is a big one. And the other one I would say is forms. So a lot of people don't realize that ClickUp has forms, just like a type form or jot form, whatever you're using, Google Forms, ClickUp has the ability to create forms. And the reason that we recommend forms over, any other platform is because it's already integrated with your system. And so it can automatically trigger things to happen in your workflow when a form is submitted. So you're not having to use a third-party tool to make that happen. So like, for example, if you use a different platform, you would have to use, Zapier to connect it to ClickUp to make something happen. Whereas in ClickUp, it automatically happens because it's already a part of ClickUp. The one thing for me that was missing from forms that they've released with 3.0 is conditional logic. So that was the one caveat to forms that I just wasn't super, I was like, man, if they just had this one thing, these would be perfect. Because at that point I could see why somebody else would use a different, form platform if they needed conditional logic for their forms. And for anybody that's not familiar, conditional logic is when a certain selection on a form is selected, that a certain type of series of questions populate. So if it's like if you select this, then you get these questions. So that was one thing that I was seeing was lacking, but they started launching, I'd say more like dripping out ClickUp 3.0 features over the past couple of months. And that was actually one of the first features that they released that we were really looking forward to. That also just made forms even more of like, okay, this sealed the deal for us with forms. Like there's no need to use forms outside of ClickUp. And so that would be the other one that I would recommend.
Yes, I'm with you I really love using the ClickUp forms as well. And talking again about like the cost analysis of different platforms. Before I switched to ClickUp, y'all, I was paying so much money to all these different, because I was using Basecamp, which is a pricier of these kinds of tools. It's over $100 a month. And then I was paying for Process Street, which was like 25 or 15 maybe a month. And then I was paying for Typeform, which is 35 a month. And there are definitely some other ones I'm forgetting. Gosh, I don't even know. I paid for a lot of different tools though, that I was paying for Voxer, which was like $5 a month. So there you go. Just all those different tools that adds up. Yeah. It does. And so when you can find a project management type tool that is cutting costs because you're using it all in one place, even if that does mean perhaps sacrificing something about one of the tools, like I liked keeping some of those things in Process Street that were in there, but it worked well in ClickUp as well. And so then you're saving some money that way. So I really love that. And one thing I would say that is a feature I really like in ClickUp that is something that simplified things a lot for us, I would say. So I have most like different spaces in ClickUp, the different task lists. I have the calendar synced with my iCalendar, and I like love living and breathing by my calendar. And so it's just really nice when I have our launch calendar synced to it. I have our entire team meeting, vacation thing. That's all one task list. That's all synced. Have my podcast pipeline synced. So when I like look at this week on the calendar, I can see, okay, here's the exact episode that's airing Tuesday. Here are all my meetings on the exact time. If those meetings were in ClickUp, here's everyone's time off. So I can quickly see like, oh yeah, this person's going to be out of office these days. And it's just all right there, even though it's in different spaces in ClickUp. And then I can click into it from my calendar. So anyway, that's something that like has helped things just be really organized for me versus before some of those things were kind of getting scheduled more all over the place. And then therefore like I'm like literally manually adding it to my calendar. So if we change the launch date, I'm changing it in this place and on the calendar and all that. So
yeah, it saves time. And, in speaking to what you brought up about a cost analysis and, ClickUp, really, that's one of the first things that we do, right? When we set up or do a ClickUp setup with a client, our step one is an audit. And as a part of that audit, we're doing a cost analysis. And what we're doing is we're looking at other platforms that you are utilizing in your business. And we're seeing how much you're spending, and we're seeing where ClickUp could be plugged in instead to save you some money and condense your platforms. So like one example for us that we used to use and loved, and it's still a great tool, was Airtable. We loved Airtable. It was great for, database management, record management. However, ClickUp has a table view. And so it really didn't make sense for us to continue to utilize Airtable if ClickUp inherently did the same thing. And we're, not paying for an additional platform because of it. So that's another thing too, is like when we're talking about shiny object syndrome and systems and platforms and all these things, is just to pay attention to like, how can we condense this? How can we make our life easier, simpler, save money, manipulate the tool to do what we need to have our business run more successfully. So
yes. Yeah. Okay. One last question for you that I meant to ask you earlier, because I think this is very relevant to listeners. How is something like ClickUp different from things like Dubsado, HoneyBook, and 17 Hats, which we refer to those as client management softwares, and we're calling ClickUp a project manager. Mm-hmm. So how are those different? And do you think there's room for both in a business and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dubsado, HoneyBook, 17 Hats, all of those types of softwares are what's called a CRM, right? Client relationship management tool.
Oh, I said it wrong. Yeah. What did I say? Client management? Yeah, you got it. Relationship.
I say client management too, just because client relationship management is a mouthful and it's just unnecessary. So yes. So there's CRMs and there is room for both. We use both. We personally use ClickUp and HoneyBook. However, their role in our business functions differently. Inside of both, I know for sure Dubsado and HoneyBook, there are abilities to create tasks associated with your clients, right? So technically you could manage some tasks out of there if you wanted to. However, it is not near at the capacity in which ClickUp can manage tasks. One big thing that I see lacking is the ability to create recurring tasks, so things that happen on a recurring basis. And I do think that's a really necessary and important piece to project management. So you're not having to think to create a task multiple times. So how we personally use both is HoneyBook only functions for us from the point when a person is inquiring about a service until they become a client. So it's only used for communication up until the point that they become a client. We send proposals, invoices, and contracts. That's it. There's nothing else that's done in there. We don't have forms in HoneyBook other than our very first. Actually, no, we don't even use that HoneyBook form anymore. So we that's it. We use it for invoices, proposals, and contracts. At the point that a client signs a contract and pays their deposit, they automatically get, in our mind, they're moved to our ClickUp dashboard. So we build dashboards for all of our clients inside of ClickUp. All communication is moved there. There is a button that we have in there that's linked to their contract if they want to view it, or their HoneyBook portal, so to speak, if they want to go back in and look at past invoices or things of that nature. But we use them to supplement one another. One is specifically for invoices, contracts, and payment. And the other one is project and workspace management. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a really good way to explain it. Even how you said that for you guys, at least it's up until they're booked or through the booking process. Cause that's the thing, everyone should know you cannot accept payments through ClickUp. It's not that type of software. So something like Dubsado and HoneyBook would be where you're doing that sort of stuff, and contracts, proposals, your contact form, your website, embedding those kinds of forms is going to be really great. And then you're pulling them into that database. And then once their client, being in something like ClickUp. And that's too in Book.Designer, I teach that of showing you with Dubsado specifically, how to do those early steps there, and also using Dubsado forms for some of it, but then putting them in ClickUp as a client to run the project that way. Because you're not doing those sorts of things there. And I always feel like it'd be too complicated if you were. I kind of like that you changed to something else versus trying to keep it all there.
It's kind of like the same thing we were talking about previously about trying to fit something into to do something it's not intended to do, fitting into a box. So I think the easiest way to look at it is lead process, lead acquisition, CRM, once they become a client, project management.
Love it. Okay. A few rapid fire questions for you.
Yes.
What is an unpopular opinion you have about systems?
I'd say it's kind of twofold. One is that we are we are big proponents of lean systems, because a lot of the times when you talk to, systems people, they want to, oh, you need this tool and this one and this one and this one, and you can't live without all of them. And that's just not true. It's not true. And that's not how we want to function. We don't want to create more chaos. And, when our intention is to create more efficiency and make lives more simple, right? So I'd say that's one. And then I would say that there's like a one size fits all, like so many people really try to sell you on like one size fits all systems and processes for your business, when that's really not the case either. Like one of our, I'd say, things that makes us really excited and proud of what we do is we custom tailor everything to not just the business, but the trajectory of the direction you want your business to be going. We don't want to just look at building systems for where your business is right now. We want to look at, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years from now, where do you want to go, and how can we build systems now to support that as much as we can? Obviously, that's not to say that we won't tweak and change things and evolve things along the way, but I'd say that is another thing that I'd say is a little different about us.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. It's not all one size fits all.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What's something we can do as business owners to get more time back in our businesses and lives?
Focus on ROI. Focus on what is actually making a return on your business. And this goes back to like looking at like the running the race analogy, right? So many people think that because everybody else is doing all of these things in their business, that they have to be doing them too. Well, this person has a podcast and a blog and a YouTube channel, and they're on TikTok and they're doing all these things. Great for that person. Maybe it's working out for them. I don't have time to do all those things. I don't have time. And that's a lot of energy and a lot of effort, right? And so this goes back to utilizing data in your business. We're like I said, big data people. We track metrics. We look at the numbers. But it's because it's important, and because that's actually showing you what's working and what's not in your business. So a very basic example of this, let's just say you had like a lead gen process where you were engaging with people on Instagram for 1 hour a day, and you got 10 leads. And then you're going and doing the same thing in a Facebook group for 4 hours a day, and you got 1 lead. Obviously, your time is much better allocated to lead engagement on Instagram because you're doing it for less time and you're getting more leads. And so that's what I would say is like really focus on what is working for you and focus on those things and eliminate everything else because it's not necessary. It's not. We don't need to be doing all the things in our business, and that is overcomplicating and making us just doing busy work. And that's not why we started our business, right? Like when we were stuck in corporate or on 9-to-5s, it was, oh, we have to sit in this desk for 8 hours because that's what we're supposed to do, even if we're super efficient with our time and we got everything done. And that's not a true narrative that I want to continue into my own business. And so I want to focus on what's working. I want to be efficient. I want to do those things, and I want to simplify everything else. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I'm totally with you, and I agree with all that. And that's a really good point to end on, and a good call to action for people. Like right now, if you are looking at your business and your marketing and all your efforts, and maybe you're not looking at the data, but you're asking, I feel like most podcast listeners, because I talk about this all the time, are probably asking, where did you find me on your contact form or on your purchase order form? Like you need to be asking that question. So if you're not, be asking that, but then actually look at it and see, like you're saying, if you're looking at this and you're like, oh yeah, 10 of my leads this month came from Instagram and none came from YouTube.
Yep.
Like, for me in that situation, how I would analyze that is like, okay, maybe like YouTube's the new thing you're trying. You're committing to trying it for a certain amount of months. You don't just want to look at 1 month data,
right.
1 month of effort, but like after the certain amount of months that you've told yourself, I'm going to try this for 6 months. And now it's still like 1 lead. It might be time to like throw in the towel on that and use your time better doing something else, whether that's spending more time with your family, doing something else you love, or putting your energy into something else in your business that has a better ROI.
Yeah, I totally agree. So just because the hours are there doesn't mean you have to fill them with stuff that's unnecessary and not like contributing to moving the needle forward or your bottom dollar in your business. Spend that time doing other things that are fulfilling or that you want to be doing in your business or your personal life and focus on those things instead.
I love it. And I said this episode was going to be shorter, and here we are still talking I know it is so hard. We can talk forever. Okay, so tell everyone where they can find you and work with your team and shop all of your ClickUp templates and all that stuff.
Sure. So you can find us. We have our website. It's wearesystemsup.com, which I'm sure it'll all be linked in the show notes. We also have our Instagram. It's also We Are Systems Up. So you can find us there. You can shoot us an email, support@wearesystemsup.com. But as far as how you can work with us, we have a free circle community. I'll make sure Elizabeth has the link to that as well, where we chat all things systems in there. And we have templates and courses in there as well. And then we also have our VIP ClickUp setup, which is what we did for Elizabeth, where we come in and do like our big kahuna overhaul of everything in your business from A to Z for your ClickUp setup. And we do that with you. It's a collaborative process over about a 45-day period. And that's our big like custom project that we do with our clients. So
yes, that was so amazing. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, you guys connect with Courtney and watch for the next episode with her to come through the podcast feed to hear us talk more about mom stuff and how Courtney works one day a week. So this was amazing, though.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravy.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravy.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravy.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.